What if everything you believe about yourself, your name, your role, your personality was only a mask? What if the real you has been buried beneath layers of fear, expectation, and silence? In this video, we dive deep into Carl Jung's most haunting question: how do we see our true self? Not the self shaped by society, not the version built to survive, but the one that has always been there, waiting to be uncovered. We will explore why most people mistake the light for truth and ignore the power hidden in their shadow. We'll reveal how the persona traps us, why our relationships act as mirrors, and how dreams can guide us toward inner wholeness. This isn't about perfection, it's about integration, about reclaiming what you've abandoned in yourself. Across 10 powerful chapters, you'll discover not only Jungian theory, but deep personal insight into what it means to be fully alive, fully human, and finally free. Stay with us, because the moment you stop pretending is the moment your true self begins to speak. The ancient question, who am I? There is a question that has echoed through the centuries, whispered in sacred texts, painted into ancient cave walls, and buried deep within our restless minds. Who am I, really? It is a question older than civilization, older than language, and yet it remains the most personal mystery we will ever face. Carl Jung devoted his life not to answering this question with logic, but to living inside it. Because he understood something profound: our true self is not something we construct. It's something we uncover. We live in a time of performance. From the moment we wake, we slip into roles like costumes, friend, worker, lover, parent. And yet beneath all of that, there is a strange tension, a silent ache that visits us in moments of stillness. A whisper, barely audible, that says, "This isn't all you are." Have you felt that? A sensation that behind your own eyes, there is someone watching, someone deeper, someone unspoken. That is the beginning of the true self-calling. But the tragedy is this: most people will spend their lives never answering that call. Because seeing the true self isn't easy. It's not a motivational slogan. It's not a checklist or a lifestyle. It is, in Jung's words, a confrontation with the unconscious. And that means facing the one thing we are taught to avoid ourselves. To begin this journey, we must first unlearn everything we were told about identity. Society teaches us to be good, to fit the mold, to wear the smile. But Jung asks us something more dangerous, more honest. What if the pursuit of goodness is keeping you from wholeness? What if your so-called flaws are not mistakes, but clues? What if the things you've hidden, your fears, your rage, your pain, are not poison, but portals? This is where individuation begins, the process of becoming who you were always meant to be, not by addition, but by excavation. Imagine yourself as a statue already carved beneath a block of marble. The chisel doesn't create you, it frees you. And yet, what we must chip away are not just false beliefs, but entire lives built on illusion. In this first step of the journey, we ask not for definitions, but for courage. The courage to stop looking outward for validation. Because the self, the true self, is not somewhere far away. It is right here, behind the noise, beneath the mask. But only if you are willing to look. And that leads us to a hard truth. So the question is no longer just who am I? The question is, am I brave enough to find out? The shadow is the gate. If you truly want to see who you are, you must begin where most people stop. Carl Jung called it the shadow, not because it is evil, but because it is hidden. And what is hidden becomes powerful, not because it has strength of its own, but because we deny it. We pretend it isn't there. We run from it, bury it, dress it in silence. But it doesn't go away. It waits. You've met your shadow before. Every time you felt irrational anger and couldn't explain it. Every time jealousy crept into your thoughts and you shamed yourself for feeling it. Every time you judged someone harshly, only to later realize it struck a nerve because it mirrored something unclaimed within you. That is the shadow at work. It is the side of you you were told not to be, the side that didn't earn approval. But Jung taught us something radical. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the beginning. Imagine this. You're walking through a dense forest at dusk. There's a clearing ahead, but to reach it, you must pass through a cave, cold and unlit. You hesitate. You want to go around, but there is no other path. This is how the inner world works. To get to your essence, you must go through the parts of yourself you'd rather forget. The shadow holds not just your shame, but your strength. Not just your wounds, but your power. The anger you've suppressed might contain the fire you need to set boundaries. The sadness you've denied might carry the key to your empathy. The selfishness you fear might hold the wisdom of self-preservation. These are not sins to be erased, they are signals to be decoded. But here's the danger. If you continue to ignore the shadow, it doesn't disappear. It becomes fate. As Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That is why we find ourselves repeating patterns, choosing partners who wound us in familiar ways, sabotaging opportunities we claim to desire, fearing freedom more than failure. The shadow is behind it all, not because it wants to destroy us, but because it longs to be seen. To integrate the shadow is not to defeat it. It is to acknowledge it, to listen to what it has to say. And when you do, something strange happens. The fear begins to lessen. You stop being at war with yourself. You reclaim what was lost. You become whole not in spite of your darkness, but because of it. So let me ask you now, not as theory, but as invitation, when was the last time you sat with your own shadow? Not to judge it, not to destroy it, but to understand it. Because the gate is here and it will not move. The only way forward is through. The spiral path of individuation. We like to believe that growth is linear, that if we just keep moving forward, success, clarity, and self-realization will follow. But Carl Jung shattered that illusion. He taught us that the journey to the true self does not move in a straight line. It spirals. It winds. It circles back before it breaks through. And if we do not understand this, we will mistake every step backward as failure, when in truth, it is part of becoming whole. This path, which Jung called individuation, is not a project you finish, it is a way of living. A deep process of integration where you learn to carry your contradictions without collapse. Where you stop choosing between light and shadow and begin holding both in your hands with reverence. It is not for the faint of heart. Because unlike the ego, which craves certainty, the true self lives in paradox. Think of it this way. Imagine standing at the edge of a labyrinth. The entrance is open, but there is no map. You know only one thing: to find what's most precious, you must go in. At first, it feels exhilarating. You're discovering new truths, shedding old skins, naming forgotten desires. But soon, the path darkens. You return to patterns you thought you'd healed. Old fears resurface. Old wounds reopen. You wonder, why am I here again? Didn't I already deal with this? That is the spiral. Every return is deeper. Every repetition is refining you, not punishing you. Jung believed that suffering was not always a sign of brokenness. It was often the soul's way of demanding attention. When you feel lost, confused, or like you're unraveling, it may be that something greater is trying to emerge through you. Not something foreign, but something forgotten. But individuation also means facing death, not literal death, but ego death. The dismantling of the identity you've carefully built. The moment when you realize that who you thought you were is not enough. That can feel like falling apart. But Jung saw it differently. He wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. The breakdown is not the end. It is the opening." In Western culture, we are taught to value control, to plan, to achieve. But the psyche is not a machine. It is a mystery. It cannot be forced. It must be listened to. And often, what it asks is not that we climb higher, but that we descend into the forgotten, the irrational, the broken, the true. So if you find yourself circling old terrain, lost in the fog of your own becoming, do not despair. You are not failing. You are deepening. You are walking the spiral. And the self is not ahead of you. It is waiting at the very center, patient, silent, whole. The real question is, can you keep walking, even when the path no longer makes sense? Unmasking the persona. Every morning, we wake up and put on the mask. We smile when we're tired, we nod when we disagree, we act strong when we feel fragile. And most of the time, we do it without question. Because we've been trained since childhood to become acceptable, to be admired, agreeable, successful. Jung called this mask the persona, the social self we construct to survive the world. But what happens when you begin to believe the mask is you? The persona isn't evil. It has a purpose. It allows us to interact with others, to navigate roles, to meet the demands of life. But the danger begins when we grow so attached to this mask that we mistake performance for authenticity. We curate our personality, filter our emotions, and silence our truth until one day we look in the mirror and feel nothing. Just an empty costume performing the idea of a person. Jung warned that over-identifying with the persona creates a dangerous split in the psyche. Because while the outer image may appear flawless, the inner world grows hollow. And eventually, the weight of pretending becomes unbearable. Like an actor stuck in a role he no longer remembers auditioning for, we begin to crack under the pressure of our own disguise. Have you ever felt that tension? That moment of silence after a party, when everyone's gone and the mask slips? Or the quiet grief you feel when people praise a version of you that doesn't quite exist? That's the cost of forgetting who you are. Western culture rewards the persona. We are taught to optimize, to market ourselves, to brand our image like products. But the soul cannot be packaged. And when we reduce ourselves to a role, the nice one, the achiever, the strong one, we amputate the rest. Our vulnerability, our rage, our complexity, our truth. To unmask the persona is not to become chaotic or reckless. It is to become honest. It is to ask, whose expectations am I living for? What parts of myself have I silenced just to be liked? It is to stop measuring your worth by how well you perform and start valuing how deeply you feel. This is not easy. In fact, it is terrifying. Because when you take off the mask, you risk losing the approval of those who only love the performance. But you also make space for real connection, for relationships not built on admiration, but on truth. And for the first time, you can look at yourself and say, this is me, not perfect, not polished, but real. So here's the question. If you weren't trying to impress anyone, who would you be? Because until you answer that, the persona will keep speaking louder than the soul. The mirror of relationships. If you want to see yourself clearly, don't look in the mirror, look into the eyes of those you love, those you fear, and even those you resent. Because as Jung understood, we do not come to know the self in isolation. We find it reflected back to us, distorted, magnified, challenged through the people around us. Every relationship is a mirror, and what it reflects is not always easy to face. Have you ever noticed how certain people evoke powerful reactions in you? Someone's confidence makes you feel small. Someone's neediness awakens your guilt. Someone's silence makes you irrationally angry. These emotional triggers aren't random. They are signals. They tell you that something inside you is being touched, something unprocessed, something unconscious. Often, the parts of others we struggle with most are the very parts of ourselves we've yet to accept. Jung called this projection. We project onto others what we cannot hold within ourselves. We see in them what we deny in us. The friend we label arrogant may carry the ambition we've been taught to repress. The partner we call cold may reflect our own buried fear of intimacy. These mirrors are not comfortable, but they are necessary, because they show us the outlines of our own shadow. But not all mirrors wound. Some illuminate. There are people rare, unmistakable, who hold space for us not just to be seen, but to see ourselves. They listen without judgment, they challenge without cruelty, and most of all, they remain when the mask falls off. These are the sacred relationships. The ones that don't flatter your ego, but feed your soul. The ones that don't just confirm who you are, but awaken who you could become. And yet, even these mirrors will crack if you are unwilling to meet them with vulnerability. Real intimacy requires risk. It demands that we let go of the persona, that we show not just our light, but our wounds. And in doing so, we give the other person permission to do the same. This mutual revealing, this mirrored surrender, is where the true self begins to emerge. But here's the paradox. While relationships help us see ourselves, they also tempt us to abandon ourselves. We lose ourselves in love, in loyalty, in longing. We compromise too much, or we expect too much. So the question becomes, how can I be fully myself, while still fully connected to another? The answer lies not in merging, but in mirroring. Not in sameness, but in reflection. Jung believed individuation does not separate us from the world, it integrates us into it, more honestly, more consciously. But only if we dare to look at what others reflect back, not just with resistance, but with curiosity. So next time someone provokes you deeply, ask, what are they revealing about me that I have not yet dared to face? Because the world is not just happening to you, it is speaking to you. And sometimes, it is speaking as you. The language of dreams and symbols. Long before we spoke in words, we spoke in images. Fire, serpent, ocean, birth, death. These symbols are older than any alphabet etched into our collective psyche. Carl Jung believed that our unconscious mind still speaks this ancient language, not in logic, but in dreams, in symbols, in the strange poetry of the night. And if we learn to listen, we may just hear our true self whispering from the depths. Most people dismiss their dreams. It was just random, just weird. But Jung saw dreams not as noise, but as guidance. He called them the royal road to the unconscious. They reveal not who we pretend to be, but who we truly are. And not only that, they show us who we are becoming. Imagine you're dreaming of drowning. You wake up breathless, disturbed. Most would shake it off. But Jung would ask, what is trying to be born through that water? Water, after all, is a universal symbol of the unconscious, of the feminine, of emotion. Are you overwhelmed? Or is something within you calling to be felt, acknowledged, allowed? Or perhaps you dream of being chased by a shadowy figure, a monster, a stranger. Jung would suggest that figure may not be your enemy. It may be your own disowned self, trying to catch up with you. The shadow often appears in dreams not to punish us, but to demand our attention. It brings the parts we've suppressed onto the stage of the night, hoping we'll finally look. Symbols, too, arise in waking life through art, stories, synchronicities, the sudden emotion that erupts when you see an old photograph or hear a certain song. These aren't coincidences. They are invitations, clues from the soul, messages in a language you once knew, but forgot how to read. And here's the remarkable part. You don't need a guru to interpret them. You already hold the key. Because the symbols that appear to you are shaped by your inner world. The image that comes in your dream is chosen by your psyche, not randomly, but precisely because it knows what you need. Your soul speaks in symbols because the truth it holds cannot be reduced to plain words. It must be felt. It must be lived. Jung believed that healing doesn't always come from thinking more. It comes from seeing differently. And dreams are how the unconscious rebalances what consciousness distorts. If you are too rational, your dreams may flood you with chaos. If you are too controlled, they may throw you into flight. They're not trying to break you, they're trying to balance you. So tonight, before you sleep, ask your unconscious a question. Then listen. Not with your ears, but with your soul. The answer may not come as words. It may come as an image, a symbol, a scene that lingers long after waking. And if you dare to follow it, you may find it leading not just deeper into your mind, but closer to yourself. Integration, not perfection. We have been taught, almost from birth, that the goal of life is to be good, to be kind, to be successful, to be flawless. But in Jungian psychology, that idea is not just misleading, it is dangerous. Because when you chase perfection, you inevitably reject parts of yourself. You suppress your anger, your jealousy, your insecurity, your wildness. You cut off anything that doesn't fit the image. And in doing so, you don't become better. You become fragmented. Carl Jung once said, "I'd rather be whole than good." Let that sink in. He was not advocating for moral chaos, but for psychological honesty. Because goodness, as defined by culture, often requires obedience. It rewards compliance. It encourages masks, but wholeness demands truth. It asks that you include every part of yourself, even the ones that scare you, especially the ones that scare you. Integration is the heart of individuation. It means bringing the shadow into the light, not to destroy it, but to give it a voice. It means letting go of the fantasy of purity and embracing the complexity of being human. In Western culture, where we are constantly measured by productivity, by appearance, by morality, this is a radical act. Because wholeness cannot be marketed. It cannot be polished. It cannot be controlled. Think of yourself as a mosaic. Each broken piece, the grief you carry, the mistakes you regret. Integration is not about fixing these pieces. It's about arranging them into something beautiful and true. Something that holds both light and shadow. Something only you can be. And here's the paradox. When you stop striving to be perfect, you become more powerful. Not in the way the world defines power, but in the way the soul understands it. You become grounded, centered, capable of sitting in the fire of contradiction without burning. You become someone who no longer runs from discomfort, but walks through it. Who no longer clings to certainty, but lives with presence. This doesn't mean the journey ends. In fact, it means it deepens. Because integration is not a one-time event, it's a lifelong practice. As you grow, new aspects of the shadow emerge. Old patterns reappear in new forms. And each time, you are invited to expand, to stretch your capacity to hold complexity without shame. So ask yourself, what part of you have you tried hardest to get rid of? And what if that part is the missing piece? What if the thing you hate in yourself is not your flaw, but your teacher? Because healing does not come from becoming better. It comes from becoming whole. And the self, the real self, can only emerge when nothing is left out. The courage to disappoint. We are raised to please, to make our parents proud, to earn the approval of teachers, friends, bosses, partners. We learn early that being accepted often means being agreeable, that love is conditional, that belonging has a price, and that price is authenticity. Carl Jung understood this all too well. That to walk the path of individuation, we must at some point choose truth over approval. And that choice comes with a cost, the courage to disappoint others. This might be the hardest part of seeing your true self, because it means letting go of who the world wants you to be. It means no longer shrinking to fit someone else's comfort or polishing your edges to remain likable. It means risking rejection, not from strangers, but from those whose love once defined your worth. In a culture obsessed with image, where social media teaches us to perform perfection and curate identity, living authentically can feel like rebellion. And in a way, it is. It is the refusal to betray yourself just to be liked. It is standing firm when others expect you to fold. It is choosing solitude over self-betrayal. Think of the subtle betrayals you've made in the name of harmony. The opinions you swallowed. The boundaries you erased. The truths you hid so someone else wouldn't leave. These moments seem small, harmless. But over time, they corrode the soul. They teach you that love must be earned through self-abandonment. And that's a lesson that must be unlearned painfully, slowly, deliberately. Disappointing others doesn't mean you're unkind. It means you have stopped abandoning yourself. It means you trust your inner voice more than the noise outside. Jung believed that this inner voice, the self, will often lead you away from the crowd into deeper, quieter territory. And yes, Not everyone will follow you there. But that's the point. Individuation is not about being understood by the world. It's about understanding yourself so deeply that external misunderstanding no longer breaks you. There will be consequences. Some people will call you selfish. Others will call you changed. But what they're really saying is, you're no longer controllable. And that's not selfish. That's sovereign. It's the reclaiming of your life. In Western society, we are taught to equate goodness with self-sacrifice. But Jung invites us to question that narrative. What if self-betrayal is the real sin? What if disappointing others is sometimes the most honest, most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself? So ask yourself now, whose approval am I still chasing? Whose disappointment am I still afraid of? And more importantly, what would it feel like to finally stop apologizing for who you are? Because the path to your true self is not paved with applause. It's paved with integrity. And every time you choose that path, even when it hurts, you come home to yourself. Living as the self-alignment over achievement. We've been conditioned to chase success, chase recognition, chase the next goal, the next milestone, the next version of ourselves. In this pursuit, we measure life by outcomes, what we have achieved, what others see, what can be posted, proven, praised. But Jung invites us into a deeper reckoning. What if the point is not to achieve more, but to align more? To live as the self, not the persona, is to stop asking, what should I do? And begin asking, what is true for me? It is a radical shift in orientation from performing for the world to listening inward, from pleasing to aligning, from striving to becoming. And while society applauds the performer, it rarely understands the aligned. Carl Jung knew that the authentic self does not shout. It whispers. It moves like water, quietly but with force. And when you begin to live from that place, life no longer feels like a battle. You stop grinding to meet external metrics. You stop sacrificing sleep, joy, and peace to keep up with illusions. Instead, you begin to create from within relationships, work, choices that reflect who you are, not what you're supposed to be. But alignment is not passive. It's not about floating through life. It's about choosing every day to show up real, to say no when it's easier to say yes, to say yes when fear says hide, to let go of the version of yourself that wins applause and embrace the one that sleeps well at night. Western culture, especially in the modern digital age, glorifies visibility over vitality. You're told to be seen, go viral, build a brand. But being visible is not the same as being alive. Some of the most outwardly successful people are inwardly starving, disconnected from themselves, lost inside the image they created, because they climbed a ladder without asking whether it was leaning against the right wall. When you live from alignment, you may disappoint the world, but you won't disappoint your soul. You may lose opportunities, but you'll find yourself. And what you do achieve will feel real, rooted, alive, not because it impressed others, but because it came from the deepest part of you. Here's the truth: a life of achievement can still be hollow. A life of alignment never is. So ask yourself, are you living a life you chose, or one that was chosen for you? Do your days reflect your values, your rhythm, your truth? Or do they reflect the expectations of people who never truly saw you? Because the goal is not to be everything to everyone. It's to be fully yourself, unapologetically, imperfectly, and completely. Not someday, but now. The radiance of realness. There comes a moment quiet, unannounced, when something shifts. You stop performing. You stop reaching. You stop twisting yourself to fit into spaces that never felt like home. And in that stillness, something else appears. Not grand, not dramatic, just real. That is the beginning of the true self. Carl Jung believed that the greatest privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also knew the cost. It means walking through your shadow, shedding your persona, disappointing others, facing dreams that unsettle you, letting go of ideals that once gave you meaning. It is not a straight line. It is not a clean process, but it is the only way to become whole. And when you do and you stop pretending, hiding, performing, you don't need to shine anymore. You radiate, not because you're trying, but because realness has gravity. It draws others in, not to worship you, but to remember themselves through you. Because when one person dares to live authentically, it gives silent permission for others to do the same. That is how the world changes. Not with noise, but with presence. This is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming true. To say, this is who I am. Not what I was told to be. Not what I used to be. But what I've uncovered. And from that place, you begin to live differently. You speak more honestly. You listen more deeply. You hold your pain without shame. You hold others without judgment. You walk through the world, not above it, not beneath it, but in it. And here's what's beautiful: the more you become yourself, the less you need the world to understand you. Because understanding is no longer the goal. Being is. And from being comes everything else: clarity, compassion, direction, peace. So now, we return to the beginning. You were never lost. You were only layered, covered in expectation, fear, and the desperate need to belong. But beneath all of it, you remained, whole, waiting, not for permission, but for your own return. And now, just one question remains. If you stopped pretending, stopped performing, stopped running, who would you finally become? And isn't it time to find out?